Hey, remember when Superman fought the Incredible Hulk? Or when Batman teamed up with Daredevil and Spider-Man to take down crime? Well, DC and Marvel just announced they are reprinting their classic crossover collections into two oversized hardcovers. Now, the DC vs. Marvel Omnibus and DC vs. Marvel The Amalgam Age are both available for pre-order right now at Organic Price Books. So if you want to learn about Dark Claw or the original Spider-Boy, go ahead and place your pre-order. You'll get over 30% off and you'll save $2 every time with code BJKicks at checkout. Just visit comicsaredope.com/crossover. That's comicsaredope.com/crossover. All right, guys. So my next guest, this is what I'm really excited about. This next guest is an artist that I was actually introduced to by Stephanie Williams, the writer. But this is the artist on Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, Wreck and Roll. If you go through her Instagram, like you will quickly fall in love with her art style. And I'm excited to talk about it and all of the inspirations here with Miss Asia Simone. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. It's a good day today. So thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for coming on. This has been in the works for a little while. I'm excited about it.
Yes, yes. I'm very excited as well. I love being able to do interviews and talk. So I'm here for good times. I appreciate it.
Nice, no problem at all. So I guess we'll jump right in. So like I said, I was introduced to your work with Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur Wreck and Roll,
Mhm.
which is awesome, by the way. I was looking for my copy to just kind of have on display during the episode. I think my daughter has run off with it because I can't find it. But um, it's I don't know, your art style for me is just super refreshing. But I'd love to know maybe how long you've been into art and what inspired you and what got you started.
Yeah, so I've been drawing pretty much my entire life. I started kind of like doing serious art classes and like I want to say second grade. But the thing that always inspired me the most was cartoons. I'm a big cartoon lover. Um, modern cartoons, older cartoons. I love anime. And I've been reading a tons of like comics and like things, especially in the Western hemisphere as well as manga. I mean, I just kind of constantly am consuming cartoons and fiction, so that's like my biggest inspiration.
Got you. That's funny because you can see it in the art. So now I gotta ask, what were your favorites? I won't put you on the spot for a top five, but what were some of your favorite cartoons coming up?
So coming up, my favorites were like Codename Kids Next Door. I am a big Tom and Jerry fan. Some of my other favorites, it is hard on the spot. Like the older ones. Oh my goodness. I mean, like Billy and Mandy, like pretty much everything Cartoon Network put out, not gonna lie. I'm a big like
Mm.
Cartoon Network fan. Um, Jimmy Neutron. And then, as I got older, like things like Steven Universe, I love Gravity Falls, Infinity Train is a bit newer. OKKO is one of my big faves. And then, then there's anime and that's its own world. One Piece is always my favorite. Hunter x Hunter is like a close second. Blue Lock, and then there's things that are old, like Case Closed. I could literally go on forever.
Got you,
Yeah.
got you. Just based on the references you're naming, I've got to place you somewhere around like 10 years younger than I am. So early 20s,
Late 20s.
late 20s. Okay. Okay. So that just means you were watching it longer than I was. I remember by the time Codename Kids Next Door came out, like I was kind of on my way out of cartoons. Um, but like for me, when you say Cartoon Network, I'm thinking Dexter's Lab, Cow and
Mhm.
Chicken,
Yes.
um, Ed and Nettie. Like those were some of my favorites.
I, I promise you, it's just because I'm on the spot and I couldn't remember any right off the hand. But yes,
Uh,
all to all of those. I watched all those. Yeah.
got you. Um, but yeah, no, cartoons are life.
Yes.
Um,
Agreed.
and so, all right, so you love cartoons, which is cool because I feel like most 90s kids did. Like we had everything. We had the best of Nicktoons, we had the best of Cartoon Network or the launch of Cartoon Network. We got, anime on TV for the first time,
Mhm.
at least on a regular basis with Toonami. And
Mhm.
then we also got like all the classic superhero cartoons. Like the best superhero cartoons came out when we were kids and stuck in front of the TV. So hard not to be inspired by that. Um,
Yes.
And so if you had to like think about like what your maybe influences from an art standpoint, what would they be?
So I would definitely say I go back to One Piece, mostly expressions.
Mm,
That's kind of like my bigger inspiration for facial expressions. Um, I would say like Steven Universe was a big inspiration for me artistically. To see if there's any, I would say just anime in general. I don't necessarily draw in an anime style, but I
mm,
take inspiration from anime just kind of in general. Um, and then I would say like a mix of comic book styles or like comic artists, um, things that are a bit like in the wackier realm, like things that you'll find on like webtoons or like Giant Days is one of is a big inspiration. So I kind of just like blend all of those things together, and I think that's kind of how my style comes around.
nice. Nice. Now, you said you've pretty much been drawing all your life. Was art always the career focus, or was there a point where it was like, okay, well, maybe this is a backup plan or something I can do for fun, but I got to do something else for money?
No, I mean it's kind of like so I was putting in effort into drawing from a super young age. It was about around like fourth grade where I was like, oh, I'm doing this full time. Like this is
Mm,
going to be my job. And it never really was a backup plan. I had like, if you ask my mom, I had like a month in high school where I was maybe second guessing, and she was like begging me, please not to change my mind.
mm,
Um, but other than, yeah, it's pretty much always been the goal. Yeah.
got you. And I know you're based in Cali. Is that where you're from? You grew up there?
No, I'm from Philly,
Okay.
Philadelphia. hmm
Nice, nice. And so did you make the move just for schooling or what brought you to the West Coast?
I got a job as a teacher, so I actually teach full time.
Okay.
And it's like long story, but I essentially just very suddenly got the job as a teacher, and I had like 2 weeks to make the move.
Mm,
Um, and honestly, it was more of like a strategic move. It was like I know I want to do art. I was much more animation focused before, but
mhm.
now being in comics, I'm kind of just loving my place in comics. But with that being said, like having those aspirations, I was like, oh well, I know I plan to move to California at some point. So I was like, well, this is it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Nice. Yeah, my best friend growing up, he was my best man in my wedding. I'm from North Carolina, and that's where I still
Mhm.
am. But we went to school. We actually didn't go to the same college. We went to the school in the same city though. And then when he finished at A&T, he went to some art school in San Francisco. I don't know what it was, but that was his thing. He was like, I'm gonna do animation. And now he's just doing like, visual art. He puts together zines. He's got like a little scene out there in Oakland with a lot of his friends. They got a collective. And it's just cool watching them put out like just dope things. But
Yeah.
yeah, West Coast definitely seems to be a hot spot for artistry. So
Yeah. I will say like, and it still is working out in that like, me being more in the convention scene and just meeting people. I mean, a lot of people are just over here. So, it does really work out in that I get to meet and talk to and engage with a lot of professionals over here.
mm.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting to me, right? Like we've talked about like your style, your art style sort of being anime and or animation inspired. And I was going through like, because there's always a point in the show where I have to try to describe an art style for the audio listener. And scrolling through your work on Instagram, uh, it's hard to describe because it's like I can see the inspiration, I can see the influences. Like all I can say for the audio listener is like, if you've ever watched a cartoon, you've probably seen a little bit of what makes Asia's art special. Like I'm looking at, there's a series you did, Boon Girl, Devil Dinosaur, with Miles or Lunella and Miles, and your Miles looks very like Proud Family inspired. And then like you scroll down a little bit more, and you've got some stuff that very clearly seems anime inspired. You can see the Steven Universe expressions on this Wu Jin piece, like
Mhm.
and like even like some of this Princess and the Frog stuff. Anyway, we can go on and on. The point though is it's cool to me to see you sort of approximate a bunch of styles, but each piece still feels like you.
Yeah. Yeah, I've gotten that a lot actually. And I guess it's like I'm still I guess I feel like it's only been solidified in my mind the way it must look to other people because I used to think like, oh, it must look like everything you've ever seen. Like it must look like all these other types of styles because I just picked a bunch of things that I liked from different like honestly I don't know if I want to, but I totally could like label exactly where I've gotten certain things from.
Right.
Um so that's kind of how I expect people to view my art, but then people say that it just feels like its own thing and I'm like, well that's good to know. That's a good
That is
thing.
for
Yeah.
sure. And so, um, I gotta ask, like having a style that's so unique, though it draws, you know, references from things that are familiar to us, um, it very much stands out from like other comic artists. Have you felt that's been like a strength, when it comes to getting jobs, or has it been a detriment at times?
It feels like uh, it feels like it's been a bit of a hindrance so far, but I would say give me a few more years before we come to a conclusion.
Hmm.
Um, but that like in terms of like the because I with Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, I've like kind of like fully made my way into the comic space, but I had a book that I did in between that was a middle grade book for Scholastics, Pack Your Bags, Maggie Diaz, and like being in the traditional space, it's not loved because it feels animation centric. And that's not necessarily like the preferred thing when it comes to like traditional publishing. And so traditional publishing again is like picture books, middle grade books, chapter books, things like that. So
Hmm.
that's not loved over there. But in comics, it's kind of like you just got to figure out where your place is at. Like it's not necessarily that my style can't work anywhere. There's just some publishing houses and studios that do more this than other things. You know what I mean? You just got to figure out where you fit. And at that point, it's just like getting your foot in the door and meeting people. So I'm not necessarily like, oh, I have to change my style. But I also am very adaptable. Like even doing the Moon Girl book, getting that job, I think was in part that I had things that looked similar. And so then once I got the job, it was, can you stay on model? And the answer is yes, yes, I can. Um,
Right.
but then the middle grade book I did was to help out a friend, and that was her style. So I had to mimic that. And so like, style shifting is kind of like what I do. But
Hmm.
yeah, I'm not concerned yet. That's what I gotta say. I say it's a little wary in these waters, but like I think feel like, it's just early. So yeah.
Right. And so I guess I'll ask just for the aspiring artist listener, how has it been sort of making your way? Like what were some of the first steps that you took to get where you are now?
So I've said it in many other places, but getting the Moon Girl book. Honestly, it was just a weird, crazy story. I just kind of Scholastics reach out because it's a project with Scholastics as well. And they were like, "You want to do this Marvel book?" And I was like, "Yep, I sure do." And that was kind of it. But
Hmm.
but what I was doing at the time, I was posting a lot on Instagram and I was posting a lot of my character stuff, which was very like much in my style. So, it worked out for me, like doing my own style and my own thing worked out for me in this instance because they needed someone with an animation looking sense to their work to do that project. And now that I'm going to conventions again, meeting people, since then it's just been I think it's about building your brand. At least that's where I'm at right now is building my brand. So showing more of the world what I do and like what I'm into, and trying to figure out ways that I can implement that into the scene that we're in.
Hmm.
um, so yeah, it's kind of I guess if I had to give any advice, like if I were to cap off the thought, it would be to, do the things that you're interested in, go full force into them. And, you have to treat art, being an artist, like it's a lifestyle. Like I wake up and I draw, I just draw all the time. I'm starting to post as much as I can. And I'm trying to put myself out there. So
Hmm.
it's just a lot. And that's why I'm saying, like, it's hard to make any definitive statements about where I'm at and how people see my work because I just feel like I'm so early in my career.
Hmm.
So right now I'm just trying my best to meet people and get to know people and to figure out how can I do more things. But I will say what gives me hope is the stuff that I like the Thor and Loki double trouble with Marvel. I'm so obsessed with that book and with the Double Trouble series because it's one of the few comics I've seen that have such an animated style to it.
Right.
And like if they can do it, I think I can do it. So like I really um I have like faith that I'm going to be able to do more in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It feels like there's a lane right now um, for like these sort of animation inspired comics that are generally aimed at kids, like middle grades, to like some YA stuff. But it's huge right now, right? And
Mhm.
it's weird though, because most of those projects aren't necessarily managed by the big two, even though they use their characters. And so it's like you're at conventions, but it's a different set of people you got to talk to. Um, and it also seems to be like very closed off. Like, I don't know, like it doesn't feel like the ideas necessarily start with the creatives. It's almost like we got to publish a book like this. Do we know a writer that can do that? And then we'll find an artist like where I've heard so many other like sort of comic origin stories. Like, yeah, I had this pitch, and so I just walked up to an editor and was like, "Hey, here's my pitch," and they're like, "Okay, sure, let's do it." And so it seems harder to break into that space in that way.
Yeah, trying to think. Well, that's the thing is like it can be.
Hmm.
Um, I feel it feels hard I feel like I don't know where to land. Where it's like I see it as like metrics because in my opinion, like it can be hard it definitely can be hard to
Hmm.
get in. But it doesn't feel as hard as getting into animation. I mean, like
No.
there's like certain like industries that are like right beside it that
Yeah.
feel more difficult. And I would say like I think the one thing that comics maybe has um compared to I think comics is the most experimental
Hmm.
out of like the some of the popular forms of in the art industries. I think like comics is kind of like the more fluid, the more experimental, and the more kind of like brave to like try different things.
Hmm.
But you know, just like any other industry, there can be the same person syndrome, or it's just especially when you're a person of color, like it can be
Hmm.
hard to break in. Um, and I would say if you're trying to break in my opinion, I think your biggest thing should be craftsmanship. I think you should be looking at not necessarily about changing your style, which whatever you want that to be, but how can you sell your style based on its quality, like
Hmm.
how well can you draw? You know what I mean?
Right.
Uh, I think that's the big thing that people maybe miss. I don't like even though it's not to say that there aren't other hurdles and that your styles and all that those things can't be a hindrance, but just that um I think whatever industry you're trying to get into, I think you need to look at what the bar of like expectation of quality and craftsmanship is. And if you can meet that bar, you probably can get in. You gotta just meet the right person, and that could just be going to your local convention and like seeing who's there and like running into somebody.
Yeah. I will say,
Yeah.
like, just from this side of things, like in the media space, it's very small. Like
Mm,
what I found once I started this podcast,
yeah.
and even me starting this podcast was kind of like at the behest of a publisher. Um, Dynamite had seen some of my stuff on YouTube and were like, "Hey, you're interested in doing some interviews?" And I'm like, "Sure, why not? Let's dust off this podcast." But it's like as soon as you start putting out quality work, it's like people notice. It's like, oh, like I've had several writers that have come onto the show specifically because it's like, oh, I saw you interviewed my friend. I've got this story. Can we talk? And I'm like, oh,
Mm.
yeah, let's do it. Um, so it's really small. And then once people see that you're putting out quality work, like they want to be associated with it. So you just gotta keep pushing though.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta keep pushing, and I think you have to ask yourself, what are you willing to deal with? Like, being a full-time artist in any capacity, whether you're an author, a writer, or whatever you're doing is a difficult thing to do. And I think, you got to come to some hard truths about like what you're willing to do and what and the amount of like work you're willing to put in, like I'm teaching full time, then I come home and I draw and I gotta get things printed and I gotta like, do emails and there's just a lot to get into. So that's just to say, I guess, not to make it sound less sexy than it is, but just that for people who are listening, and if there's anyone who wants to come in, it's like it's not that you can't. I just think you have to be comfortable with the idea that you're going to be working harder than you think, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I was just watching, well, one of my friends started a health tech startup. Um, and she was posting about just entrepreneurship and how it's just like, oh wait, it wasn't her that posted. She reposted someone else. But anyway, but the post was all about like how entrepreneurship is like not the answer to, whatever problem you're dealing with. Like if you're signing up for entrepreneurship, you're signing up for more work. So like understand you got 3, 5 years where you're gonna be putting in a lot more than you're getting out. And if you're cool with that, then be cool with that. But just know like the grass ain't necessarily greener.
True. Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like, even talking to people who are much further along in the industry, there's always something that's coming up or something that's frustrating so it kind of comes down to like, do you love it? And, even as like a person who teaches, I teach digital design and illustration. And sometimes I have students, not all the time, but sometimes I have students who like, they're like, I want to do this. I'm like, okay, but it is work. Like it's not easy. Um, there's no easy way to put out quality work in my opinion.
Mhm.
And getting noticed is even harder because you could be great. You have the best work in the world, but if no one knows about it, no one sees it, they're not looking for it, well then it doesn't matter. And that's tough because I feel like being an artist is one of the few jobs that constantly asks you to prove yourself. You
Mhm.
know, there's like people who they get a degree, they got hired for the job, and they if they want to, they can be set at that one company, that one place for like 30, 40 years. Um, and that's just kind of is what it is. But as an artist, even in studios, sometimes at least from, not that I've been in studios, but from what I've heard, like, sometimes you still have to like apply and like you still have to apply for the next job. You know what I mean? Like you have to see if your portfolio is up to par.
Mhm.
So there is never really a time where artists are not proving themselves. And if you're okay with that, then you're okay with it. And then you're going to do the work that's required of it.
Right. Now, you mentioned something I want to touch on a little bit. So you talked about like just getting noticed, like getting noticed is the hard part. Could you describe the first time you felt like, oh wait, like somebody sees me, this is going somewhere?
Well, I will say, maybe it's kind of well, I guess I won't play the comparison game, but I guess like the first time was probably like right before I graduated college. I got contacted by the Eagles, which yay, home
Nice.
team, like to do like a poster for them. And that's they for those game day posters, they do reach out to the art schools in the city. So it was like, common to do it with students. But that was like a time where I was like, oh my goodness, like I'm doing this. This is my I'm not no, I'm sorry, my cat is really asking for my attention right now. Um,
It's all good.
but that was like the first time I was like, oh, this like bigger company giving me like more money that I've like gotten on one job is like contacting me to do a thing. And like my parents are like big Eagles fans and like I I'm not a sports person, but they're big Eagles fans. So like it was like a holiday for them as well. So that was kind of like the first time I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm getting noticed. That's awesome. But I will say like getting the Marvel job for the first time and no one else knew about it. But when
Mhm.
that happened, I was like kicking and screaming and rolling around on the ground and jumping up and down. So so that was like and I would say that was the one that felt the most like shocking, not in that like it wasn't deserved, but it was just such a big deal for someone. I was only, a year out of college at the time.
Mhm.
And so I was just doing the posting and I will say another thing that people should keep in mind is that like some people, the way that they get jobs just looks different. Like there's some artists who they always get their jobs through conversations. And then there's some artists who only get their jobs because someone found them online. And like that's me. It's like most of my stuff has been someone found me somewhere online somehow and I've gotten a job. So yeah, so the Eagles one was the one that I was like, wow, that's like really amazing. I feel like I'm doing something. I haven't graduated yet. And then the Marvel the year after was like, wow, I was just with the Eagles a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, that is an awesome trajectory for sure. Yeah, like, and so I want to kind of it's so fun like having these conversations because it's like, how do I talk to an artist when someone's not watching necessarily? Um, but for me, I'm just stuck on like your approach. Um, and I know we've talked a little bit about inspirations, but when you're approaching character work, what is it that you feel like you're bringing to a page? Is there a goal of or something you're trying to express in a moment?
Yeah, I guess when I'm like working through characters, my goal is how can I express who they are as loudly as possible?
Mm,
That's the goal. So, um, and whether it's the character is like an animal or the character is like a human, I'm trying to figure out how is their facial expression going to tell us who they are? How is their body language going to tell us who they are? How is their fashion going to tell us who they are? And then how is their body built and hair and the rest of their features? How is that all going to like tell us, oh, that's who that character is? So that's usually what I'm thinking about.
got you. Now, a few weeks ago, I had Marcus Williams on the show, and
Mhm.
Marcus also does a lot of like character designs and mashups and stuff and throws them out on Instagram. In at least one instance, it's led to work. He's doing the Popeye series right now, where he gets to take his anime inspired Popeye and do a whole story with it. But he's talked about like being strategic about posting sort of this fan art, if you will, just because he likes it and so that it protects him in the event that like he's got a character that that's completely original and that he wants to himself or whatever, but maybe somebody else has more resources or could ape it or something. And he's like, well, I'm also protecting my IP while I play with their
Mhm.
stuff. Is there any
Right.
element of that in your work, or at least what you post on socials?
I mean, to be honest, no. I mean, I just kind of taken the wing it approach. I like doing fan art, but it's not something that I do often unless like I'm doing like right now Inktober's going on. So like if I'm doing a challenge like that, that's usually when you start to see me do more fan art.
Hmm.
Um and yeah, like he's not wrong in that. Like you could totally get your things stolen and like that's a possibility. I just kind of like since I've been posting online so long, I don't know. I'm just kind of like, man, look, man, I don't even want to think about it too hard anymore. It just, because I guess it's just like when you're an artist, it's like you always have the possibility of someone stealing something. And maybe I'm talking from a privileged position because it hasn't happened yet. So maybe once it happens, I'll be like gut wrenched and I'll decide to take everything off.
Hmm.
But no, I think my drawing is very intuitive. So I think maybe that's part of it too, is that like it's not that there's anything wrong with being that strategic. In fact, it's probably very smart. But I think that for me, every time I draw something, it's because it's something I feel like drawing.
Hmm.
So like if I don't feel like drawing fan art, I'm not drawing it. If I want to draw my own stuff, that's what I'm drawing. And if that's all I got to post, because that's all I've been drawing all month is my own stuff, then no, well, that's what we're posting.
Right. And so you talked about like um, wanting to express whatever the character is expressing as loudly as possible. What is it about? Uh, I don't know. Is it just your personality that wants to make things like sort of bodacious in that way? Um, or is it just come from like, I don't know, maybe growing up on like Looney Tunes or something, right? Where everything is just in the extreme.
I think that's what it is. I think I'm just kind of a student of animation and of cartoons. Kind of like at heart. So that's kind of like my philosophy is to push it as much as possible always.
Hmm.
And also it's the thing that entertains me the most. It's kind of why like One Piece is one of my bigger inspirations for character expression because I mean the expressions in that show are just absolutely ridiculous. Um, but you're never confused, you know what I mean? Like when you're reading something, in fact, I would say that's why I'm also a lover of modern art. And when I say modern art, I kind of mean like every year that goes by, I'm always kind of the biggest fan of like the newest thing, kind of like whereas like some people love to stay in like the older world and like how things used to be. But I feel like as even as like animation continues to has continued to grow, it's gotten very expressive in like many different types of ways. And so with that being said, I just feel like that's kind of where I've learned I just feel like I'm a student of that, of like pushing the expression as much as you can. I feel like I've always had issues with older styles or some art styles where the expressions are very subdued. I find that I'm just not entertained. So
Mm,
I'm just trying to bring the same entertainment to my audience, I think.
yeah. No, that makes sense. There's like the your art, I would say that there's definitely expressiveness, but there's also like a fluidity there.
Mhm.
Like, it's not crazy locked into like some sort of anatomical structure, which is not to say it's not sound, like proportions are there and stuff, but it's like it's whimsical might be too light of a word, right? Like that might make it sound like it's just kind of whatever and haphazard.
Mhm.
Um, but it's very fluid. It's like it feels natural. It feels like, it definitely it reminds me of watching those being a nerd, watching those extras like at the end of the Disney movie where they're showing how they animated Mickey to just look so bouncy all the time.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I feel like I think that's another thing that's actually like I don't know if I should be worried, but I feel like I've been told that like when people see my work, they know it's me, which is like I'm glad you guys feel that way because I get worried sometimes and I'm like I feel like this is so much different than that last thing that I just did.
Mhm.
Um and I'm like I get worried that maybe I'm doing too many things at once, but again, I guess it just comes back to my me drawing from an intuition like standpoint where I'm like, I just want to draw what feels right in the moment. And sometimes that's pushing uh design more than what I would normally do. Like, sometimes I have characters that are like kind of like squeezing and pushing and pulling in a way that's very reminiscent of like a Looney Tunes.
Mhm.
Um or I'm like kind of playing with like these weird anatomical proportions in like a way maybe reminiscent of One Piece and like the kind of like long, stretchy thin bodies and stuff like that. But then other times I'm going very like the Batman series with like very like structured and like
Mhm.
big shapes. It's kind of like I just kind of go based on what I think the story needs. And that's another thing I will say. I haven't mentioned this, but I draw from a story mindset as well. So there's a lot of artists who they just think of a cool idea in terms of like visual. Like they're like, this would be something cool to look at, and then they draw it. But like if I don't have a story in my head behind what I'm doing, I have a hard time finishing the drawing. So
Mhm.
pretty much if you ever do anything that's my own character, there's some type of story behind it. Like I'm even if I don't tell you what it is or I didn't post about it, like even like my little star babies and cloud babies I just posted.
Mhm.
There's like a whole story and concept I've been like thinking in my head for like years. So like when I draw something, there is a story attached to the character. It's never just, which is also I think why I draw a lot of characters. And I kind of wonder if that's similar for Marcus. I do a lot of character drawings because I think I'm constantly thinking about character within stories.
Mhm. Yeah, I know when Marcus and I spoke, like a lot of the times he's like, what if this happened or what if that happened? And now let me draw out of that idea. I was just watching a couple days ago, there was an old Stan Lee like VHS series where he just like was interviewing all these comic book greats. I think it was called Comic Book Greats, but the episode I was watching was a Jim Lee episode, and he's just like drawing like this superhero and then like this villain who's like kind of kidnapped the girl, and he's narrating like, oh well, this guy must be like an office. He must have like an office job by day. He's probably got a crush on the secretary lady, but she doesn't know. And so now the villain is like, about to take her out the window, and he's not having it. And Stan Lee is like, you just came up with a whole story, like why? And Jim said that it's helpful to have a story in mind because it's going to sort of dictate how your characters are acting in a given panel or in a given scene. And so it seems like a good technique.
Yeah, I definitely think it helps. But like I said, different things work for different people. Um, like I said, like some artists do other things, they come from other places, but I definitely come from a story mindset always and when I'm drawing.
And with that story mindset, how has it been, right, going from doing illustrations, kind of doing whatever stories in your head to now working with different writers and basically putting art from a script? How's that going?
I gotta say, I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with it. I love working with writers for so many reasons. I am an aspiring writer. I do want to write more, and so I'm learning a lot, seeing how writers do their thing and how they think. Um, but I love storytelling as it is. Like I don't like, there's some people who are like, I only want to do my own thing. I don't feel that way. I just want to draw stories, and I don't care if it's my story or if it's your story. So I love, experiencing kind of like the passion that writers have and how they feel about their story, and I love being able to bring it to life. And it feels like I get to connect with them on such a kind of like deep mental level. Like even with Stephanie, we didn't really get to talk to each other till kind of, and
Mhm.
so I messaged her, hey, she designed, there's like a group of characters that are new to the Common Girl universe within Moon Girl and Double Dinosaur Wreck and Roll. And Stephanie was the one who, kind of came up with their descriptions. And so I messaged her like after I was done my part of the story, and I was like, hey, do you want to see your characters? She was like, yes, I would love to. I would love to see the way they look. And so I sent it to her, and she was like, oh my gosh, it looks exactly the way I thought. And I was like, oh, that's such a good feeling. Like I love the idea that I can like read these scripts and really imagine them in my head and kind of bring them to life. So it's a cool experience. I would love to just work with tons of writers, even if, I'm like constantly working on my own things in the background. I have no issue drawing for other people.
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, no, Stephanie's cool. So I wanted to ask kind of in that vein, right? Like Stephanie talks about sort of being shepherded into the industry by Vita Ayala in a lot of ways. But then there's other mentors, of course. Um, and then just seeing you guys at Heroes Con, right? Like I think that's how we met. She's like, "Oh, have you met Asia? Y'all should talk." Right? And how has it been for you, like as you sort of meet people? Are there people who have sort of taken you and under their wings or like mentored you? Like who would you sort of give that sort of credit to?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like everyone I meet is kind of being my mentor some way, somehow. Like, Stephanie, she's really good at like kind of knowing like the industry and like how to work the industry. So she'll give me great advice. I met Ray recently, who's done himself some of like the backgrounds, or a lot of not some, a lot of the backgrounds for the longer run of the Moon Girl and Double Dinosaur series. Um, and he's just been very like, I mean, honestly, I'm supposed to be like meeting him pretty soon because he's over here in Long Beach. So we, decided to like talk with me and tell me some, teach me some things about like writing. Um, there is like Javon, which I don't know if you've met Javon, but he's kind of like, yeah, you better, yeah, he's always like at what I feel like every convention,
It's
but
that man lives on the road.
literally. And he knows everybody, and everybody knows Javon. And so Javon like immediately was like, "Oh, here, let me introduce you to X, Y, and Z." So like I just feel like every person I meet, because I'm so new and some is like sometimes it's some type of mentor to me. And it's like I'm very appreciative, and I love to, try and help out in any way that I can. But yeah, I will say the comic space has been very nice. Like I feel like most people are very nice and sweet, and they want people to do well, and they love to help out. And so that's why I say, like, I will say, like, again, compared to other industries, like, if you want to get into the comics industry, I do think you have a good chance of making your way through if you get yourself out there and start talking to people because they genuinely want to help. They love seeing talented artists. Like, everyone's just been so nice. I mean, even, you know, just I don't know, random people that end up being like my table mate. Like I just have like the greatest time and like have made so many friends just going to conventions. So yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of conventions, you'll be at New York Comic Con here in just a couple of weeks. I will be there as well. I'll be there Friday and Saturday. Um, I don't know how I'm going, like, I've been getting these invites and like, I don't know how I'm going to make the most of those 2 days. Like, it feels stressful. My wife was like, well, because I was just talking about how busy I am in real life. And she's like, well, you got your vacation coming up soon. I'm like, that is not a vacation. But yeah, I don't know. I'm excited. I haven't been in New York Comic Con before. So it'll be fun. Will this be your first one as well?
So this will be my first time tabling. I actually went once when I was like maybe 12 or 13 just
Mm.
ago. And it was nothing like it is, now. Um, Hello. But yeah, this will be my first time tabling there. I'm like super excited. I've been trying to like get prepared for it, and that's been making my head spin. But I'm excited, one, just to be there and like again to meet more people and even meet like possible fans. But also I have a, panel on Thursday.
Okay.
that I'm actually doing with Amy Reeder and Chris Robinson. They worked on like the original Moon Girl series, so I'm doing that on Thursday. I have another panel on Sunday technically, but I don't know how much I'm allowed to say yet because there's still things in the works.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so I just like if people look out for me, my table is 828. I'm pretty sure that's my table. And yeah, so I just like I hope like people come check me out. Come look for me. I'm super excited to be there.
Nice. What time is your Thursday panel?
It is at I want to say 6:30. It's either 6 or 6:30 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah.
I might actually make it. My flight doesn't land in New York till 2 p.m. Thursday, but Chris's episode actually just came out today. So it'd be fun to go and meet Chris. Anyway, so I gotta just put that in my little Rolodex of things I gotta do. But yeah, no, so what I'll ask is this, right? Because you've been going to conventions for a little bit. We met at Heroes Con. You've been at your local cons, and so and you've talked about like sort of meeting people behind the scenes or meeting people at conventions. How do you feel the convention experience has added to your career or even just your outlook as an artist?
I feel like the honestly, I feel like doing conventions brings a lot of hope, to be honest. It's kind of like when you get to feel, the least isolated, to be honest, as an artist.
Mm,
So much of being an artist is kind of like sitting at your home and doing your thing. But going to these conventions and meeting people has done a lot, one, in just like making friends and that being nice. But I really do think it is propelling my career, if I'm being very honest. Like I am meeting more people, more companies I'm at these places and just I'm making connections I don't think I would be able to make outside or I would say I wouldn't be able to, but it would just be tougher. It would require more time, more effort in other places. So I think being there in person is always going to benefit you 1,000%. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I know I speak to a lot of indie creators. I guess everybody in the industry is freelancing, but like, you got people that have sort of got their ins with the big two. You've got people that are just kind of perennial crowdfunding success stories. But it's like going out to a convention, being able to touch a segment of an audience, right? Like having people come up to you like, oh, I really loved your thing on this. Or, having somebody come up to you like, oh, wow, I didn't know you were a brown girl. Like, like all of these things that happen on a regular basis. And it definitely seems to be life-giving in that way. Um, just because, like you said, it can be very insular, especially post-pandemic, right? We're already in our houses forever, right? Like I work from home and then I do YouTube from home. So it's definitely cool to like get out, meet people that are into what you're into. Um, but yeah, it's got to be awesome to have like fans come up to you like, oh, I love this. Or even to have people that are complete strangers come up to you and leave as fans. Like, that's dope.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say it's I feel like it's kind of a hard experience to describe, It's not like I'm like famous or anything. But I've had people come up and be like, "Oh, I love the book," and like my kids love it. I think that's the comment that always makes me the happiest. Like my kid loves it. Um, and it's just fascinating. I guess I'm just like appreciative to be in that position because it's the reason why I draw, other than
Mhm.
just loving it. Like I love making stories for people to consume and to enjoy and to be a part of that is amazing. And it's kind of like feels like you got to take a step back and realize that that's what you're doing. You're curating an experience for someone to simply enjoy. And I think that's another thing about art that's just amazing. Like um all jobs are do their part in society, but it's amazing the way that art is, in some form or fashion, one, purely entertainment, but also you get to, if you want to, if you teach things and represent people, represent groups and create like positive representation for groups that you care about. I mean, that just is, I think, a great thing to be able to do.
Yeah, for sure. I was listening to Ta-Nehisi Coates is on a press run right now. He's got a new book coming out. And in it, well, at least in the interviews, he's talking about this idea that politics is a lot more than just what happens at the voting booth. But it's like, I'm learning, or he says he's learning that like all these outside experiences kind of shape how we view things, right? Like who's human, who's not, like who's worth discussing, who's not, what's worth discussing. And so, like, what that really does is bring like a sort of higher calling to writers and artists and artisans of the days. So it's an important job. And I think I don't know, for me, I'm excited. Like, I feel like I grew up in the 90s. And so, unbeknownst to me, the 90s was just like a huge time of like Black renaissance. Like, Black people were everywhere. And so, like, for me, Black people ran the world and it wasn't a question. Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, going up to like now, where we're in like these like weird wars against diversity somehow, and like just it feels like we got to fight to get like every little bit of progress and freedom and all that. It's really cool to see um be able to go to a comic convention and there's people that look like me, like, hey, she made this thing that you love, right? Like, even for my daughter to be able to watch like Moon Girl, Devil, Dinosaur, or for even the littlest one, there's this show on PBS called Lila in the Loop, and it's this basically Moon Girl without any kind of powers, but it's this little Black girl doing STEM projects for preschoolers. Um, but like, all that to say, the representation and the world building is really important, not only for kids to see themselves, but for kids to see their neighbors and understand like our differences don't make us like animals. They just make us different and they're things to embrace. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. And that was what I loved, I really appreciated about getting the Moon Girl job. Because like when, I was allowed to tell people about it, they were like, oh my gosh, this is not like a perfect project for you. Like it's like really up my alley in a lot of ways. But yeah, I would have killed to see like, a Lunella. And it's not to say like you said, like from the 90s, like, we had Black representation. It's not that we didn't, but
mhm,
I think Lunella exists in a space that as like a comic animation nerd that I am, that I didn't get to see much at all. And then, even back then, even with the representation, we kind of had archetypes that we were kind of constantly stuck in. And
mhm,
Lunella felt much more refreshed representation to me personally, that, she's so intelligent and she takes up space and everyone around her is happy that she's taking up space.
right.
And like I love that about Moon Girl and like Lunella, and the way that I've got to see her reflected in the Moon Girl series on Disney Plus and on Disney, as well as like in the book that I got to work on, and that she just gets to exist and breathe and love and learn and hurt and make mistakes. And it doesn't feel like it's against her, or that it's an issue. And I gotta say that I love that, especially with I'm just gonna be honest, honestly, with her being darker skinned as well. I'm sorry, but like I just
Mhm.
love seeing that as well. Like you didn't necessarily get that a lot, especially back in the 90s either. So like she just hit so many boxes for me. And then with being within a fantasy realm, which is like over the moon for me. So I'm super like really, really appreciative that I got to work on something like this as like my first comic book job ever.
Right. For sure. No, like it's funny, like just looking at depictions over the years, right? Like, cause I can name all the Black kids that I remember in cartoons growing up, right? And you're right, they all fit an archetype, right? You had Gerald on A. Arnold, you had Vince on Recess, right? Like you had Homeboy on Captain Planet. Like they all kind of fit the same mold, same build. Um, but it's cool to go from that to some of the things that we have now. I think there's definitely further to go. Especially in comics. Um, but hey, I mean, for now we got Craig of the Creek, so it's cool. But, but
Awesome.
I love that show.
Yeah.
Um, so obviously it's super early in your career, right? But as you are sort of navigating and charting a path, what would you like to say that the mark that you're making is?
I think two things. I think I'm touching on the things that I really wanted when I was a kid, especially as, a little Black girl who very quickly was kind of consuming anime. I think what I want to bring to the table, and I think what I am bringing to the table, is being able to see little Black girls just being the cutest little things, and that is just celebrated. And I know that sounds like simple, but I just feel like we don't get that a lot. Like I love, when you look at my art, it's very cutesy. And I love sticking to that because I did not get to see that. Like even like number five, like from Conan Kids Next Door, like I freaking love number five down,
Hmm.
but I still didn't feel like she reminded me of me when I was
Right.
younger. So I'm like, Lunella reminds me of me more than anyone I've ever seen out of all the cartoons and comics I've ever read. So, I want to kind of merge the kind of like super like girly pop things that I've come to see in like anime, and I want to merge that with like, kind of the Black American experience and like because like, we exist in those spaces as well. So I think that's what I'm bringing to the table is that I get to bring this very like cutesy, adorable, but pleasant and optimistic view of the world
Hmm.
to us, and
Yeah.
that's not to say that that's more important or better than the other points of view or perspectives, but that I feel like that's the lane that I'm in, and I feel like I do good in that lane.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Nah, it's, I don't know. It maybe with the exception of Susie Carmichael, right? Like
Mhm.
anytime you see black girls on the screen, it's a lot of times it's like they got to bring the sass, and we're more, or you guys are more, right? Like there's more to it. There's more to the experience. So yeah, I'm excited to see different depictions, varying depictions, because like it's all us, right? Um, but there's more to us than what you've seen. I guess is the point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Cool, cool. Well, I'm excited to see you sort of continue this journey. And in that vein, is there anything you've got in the works that you can even give us a little hint about?
Not really. Everything, everything is like a little bit early and hush hush and behind closed doors. I don't even know what I would get in trouble for. So
Hmm.
I can't really give a sneak peek. But what I'll say is that when you ask about working with writers, that is a thing that is happening. It's very early, but it's happening, and I'm actually pretty excited about it. I think I'm going to be able to bring some of those things I've been talking about, working with writers that I've been meeting. So things are coming, but I can't make any promises or tell anything.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Well, look, I'll definitely stay tuned. I will see you at New York Comic Con. And for those in the audience who would like to keep up with your adventures, where can they follow you?
So you can follow me on Instagram at Asia underscore Simone 405, and then on Twitter at Asia Simone 405. I would say those are the best places to find me. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I will leave those links in the description of this video and in the show notes for the audio listener. You have Asia to thank because she told me that we had to release this as a video. It was going to be too boring if it was audio only. So you guys get the video on day one. Say thank you to Asia. All right.
Good.
And with that, Asia, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for your time. Again, it was great meeting you. I'm excited to see you again, and I'm looking forward to following your career. Like you just get to be on my shelf with all my cousins in the industry, as I call them.
Thank you so much. This was such a great interview. I really love talking to you. So I really appreciate it. This was great. Yeah.
Oh, no problem at all. You're welcome back anytime. And when things are less hush hush, we'll talk about them.
Yes, for sure.
Awesome. Awesome. So, well, you guys out there, again, thanks to Asia. Thanks to you for listening. I don't know what you're doing after this, but you should stay safe, stay awesome, and read something dope today. Peace.